If you want to cook quick and delicious stir fries for the better than takeaway, well, today you're in luck because I've got 3 recipes that all follow a very simple framework. So let's get started with the easiest, which is a leftover veggie and tofu stir fry.
The first step in making a delicious stir fry is to prepare your protein of choice. Now, stir fries can be veggie or even just protein, but I want to demonstrate how to use stir frying to make a well-rounded, nutritious meal. In this case, I'm using firm tofu and I've soaked it in salted boiling water. This draws out the moisture from the tofu and tightens the proteins on the surface of the tofu, making it firmer and easier to fry. After the tofu has been soaked, I simply drain and pat it dry. Next part of a complete stir fry meal is the carbohydrate.
These are vermicelli rice noodles and they're really great. They cook in 2 to 3 minutes maximum. You literally just soak them in some boiling water and then give them a rinse. They're usually made of just rice flour and water, but I managed to find some here which are made of the whole rice grain, which I think is a bit nicer and they have a little bit more flavour.
You're welcome to use another variety of noodles such as udon or buckwheat, as both are plant-based. Just give them a little stir while they're soaking to ensure they cook evenly. The next essential part of a stir fry is the aromatics. In this case, I'm going to be starting with some ginger. I think this is a common knowledge, but using a teaspoon is the best tool for removing the skin from the ginger. Of course, you don't actually have to remove the ginger, it's just preference. I'm going to cut this into batons and then finely chop it. I also quite like just using thin batons of ginger to get a nice kick of ginger throughout the stir fry every now and again. Next, for the garlic, I'm going to chop it, but not too finely, as we're going to be cooking over a very high heat and it's going to burn too quickly if it's really small. For this stir fry, those are all the aromatics I'm going to be using. You're welcome to use some chili, but personally I don't really tolerate chili so well, so I didn't add any. So you can really use any veggies. I love using stir fries to use up leftover bits in the fridge. For example, I've got a bit of green pepper here starting to go a little bit dodgy, some courgette, some red pepper that has definitely seen better days, and some rather floppy celery. In general, you want to keep the veggies roughly the same size and thickness. It's also a good idea to keep the firmer veggies separate to the softer ones, so you can add things like carrot and broccoli first, and then add the peppers, spring onions, that sort of thing, towards the end of the cooking. Next part of the stir fry equation is the sauce, possibly the most important part, and this is just a really simple stir fry sauce made of some very simple ingredients. The main ingredient being soy sauce. I'm going to use mostly light soy sauce and then a little bit of dark soy sauce for the richness and colour. A little agave for sweetness. You can leave this out if you're using a sweet soy sauce like ketchup manis.
For the sour part of the sauce, I'm going to be using rice wine vinegar. It's sweet and has a slightly acidic flavour. You could use other vinegars such as Chinese black vinegar, it's quite nice. It has a more tart, tangy and almost smoky flavour. You could also use Chinese rice wine, which has a more aromatic flavour, or as a last resort, you could use white wine vinegar, but it's very acidic, so you should add a little bit of sugar or maple syrup to counter that.
Lastly, some water to ensure it isn't too salty and makes the dish a little bit more saucy. Nearly forgot, I'm also going to add a touch of sesame oil for the nutty, fragrant flavour.
So as you can see, the mise en place or the preparations are done. We've got the aromatics, the ginger and the garlic, we've got the noodles cooked, we've got the veggies cut up, the protein's ready and the sauce is ready. So this is really essential when stir frying, as we're going to be cooking over really high heats and things are going to move pretty quickly. And you don't want to be scrambling around looking for the rice wine vinegar or looking for ingredients that you're missing.
So my induction hob doesn't really work with woks, so a frying pan is going to have to do. If you can get one with high sides, that's going to work even better. We're going to start by pre-cooking the protein, in this case the tofu. This is a key step, as if you were to add the tofu with the veggies, the pan would be overcrowded and nothing would sort of colour and crisp, and you'd have a rather sad stir fry. Another stir fry tip is to keep some water or rice wine vinegar nearby. In case the pan gets too hot, you can just add a little splash in to cool things down. I'd also suggest stir frying in batches if you're cooking for more than 2, maybe 3 people. So once your oil is hot, we're going to add in our aromatics and stir fry them for about 30 seconds, or as soon as you see a little bit of colour on the smaller pieces of garlic, we can then add in the first lot of veggies. Keep tossing your stir fry depending on how hot your pan is. Since commercial gas hobs don't really get super hot, you can always leave the veggies for 10-20 seconds to let them get some nice colour on them. After about a minute or so, you can add in the softer veggies such as courgette and pepper, which I'd still like to have a little bit of crunch to them at the end. To season, I'm using white pepper, which is more traditionally used in Asian cooking, and it has a more pungent, spicier flavour, so be careful with it. Now the veggies are nearly ready, I'm going to add in the noodles, the tofu, and then I'm going to add the sauce, and that's the fun part. I like to add it around the edges so it sort of sizzles and coats everything really nicely. Then just simply toss the coat. If you're not comfortable doing this, then you can just use a wooden spoon or spatula. And there you have a really quick, delicious dinner packed with aromatic and umami flavours, and of course lots of crunchy veggies. Final part of the stir fry is the garnish, and for this one I'm keeping it simple with some toasted sesame seeds.
Oh, that's good. It's fragrant from the garlic and the ginger, and then the vegetables have a lovely bit of crunch to them, but they've still absorbed that salty and umami sauce, and then there's a lovely toasted nutty flavour coming from the sesame seeds.
Our next dish is a hoisin and 5-spice tempeh stir fry. Feel free to swap out the tempeh for some extra firm tofu if you're not a huge fan of it. Start by crumbling the tempeh into small pieces. If you don't love tempeh, I'd suggest crumbling it a little bit smaller so it's less overwhelming, and in the stir fry it's going to get extra crispy. Add a touch of sesame oil and toss the coat, and then we're going to add a mixture of Chinese 5-spice and corn flour. Chinese 5-spice is a lovely mix of spices including cinnamon, fennel seeds, star anise, Szechuan peppercorns, and cloves. Next we have a very rare rello pepper. Just kidding, I'm just using a mix of red and yellow peppers for this dish. Different coloured peppers are simply different levels of ripeness and thus have either sweeter or more bitter flavour. For example, green being the most unripe has the most bitter flavour, so it's nice to use a combination for variety in flavour. I'm also going to be using some purple broccoli, which I'm just going to cut into smaller florets. Then to garnish, I'm going to thinly slice some spring onions. Next we'll make the all-important sauce, and I'm going to be making my own hoisin sauce today, but you're welcome to buy a pre-made one. To a blender, I'm adding both dark and light soy sauce, plus half a teaspoon of dark or red miso paste. Then I would usually use orange juice, but I had a satsuma, so I figured it would work out fine. You can use any citrus or a slightly reduced quantity of a vinegar. Also going in is a teaspoon of sesame oil, a half teaspoon of Chinese 5-spice to carry on that theme, and 4 major dates. You can just use regular dates, but they tend to be slightly harder, so I'd recommend soaking them first, or replace with another sugar like maple syrup. Also going in is 1 clove of garlic and some water, and all you need to do is blend it up, and that will keep in your fridge for at least a few weeks. Now to start cooking, and as with the previous stir fry, we're going to pre-cook the protein so we can get it golden crispy and add lots of flavour to it. Fry the crumbled tempeh for about 4 to 6 minutes until it's lovely and golden and crispy. Season with a touch of salt, but not too much, as the sauce is quite salty, and the longer you cook the tempeh, the crispier it's going to get, so it's really up to you how long you cook it for. Then back to the pan with some olive oil, and we're going to add the same aromatics as before, which are ginger and garlic, and if you want some heat, then feel free to add some diced chili. In this case, the pan was incredibly hot, so I quickly cooled it down with a little splash of water. I'm not quite used to using the induction hob yet. Broccoli is going in first, as it's firmer and much more fibrous, so it's going to take longer than the peppers to cook. Once the veggies are slightly softened, we're going to add the brown rice and tempeh back in. Once again, if you're not comfortable with tossing the pan, then feel free just to use a wooden spoon like I'm doing here. We'll then add in the hoisin sauce. You're welcome to turn the heat off now, as the pan will stay hot for quite a while. Toss to coat all the ingredients in that sweet and savoury sauce, and we're ready to serve up. For the garnish, we're going to use those spring onions that we prepared earlier, and I'm going to add a little squeeze of lime just to contrast against the sweet flavour of the hoisin sauce. This is one I love to cook when I've got some leftover rice and I want a really quick, nutritious lunch that is very tasty.
The sweet and tangy hoisin sauce pairs perfectly with that nutty brown rice, and then you've got a lovely bit of chew coming from the tempeh, and freshness from the peppers, the spring onions, and that little bit of lime at the end.
Last but not least is this satay chickpea stir fry. Start by slicing a few spring onions. I'm going to keep the white and green parts separate. The white part has a more pungent oniony flavour, so we're going to add it at the beginning, whereas the green part is a little bit lighter in flavour, and we can add it towards the end of the cooking. For the aromatics, I'm just going to be using garlic, as there is a healthy grating of ginger in the satay sauce. Once again, not cutting the garlic too fine, simply crush and then slice. To garnish this stir fry, I'm going to be using some fresh coriander. If you don't like coriander, feel free to use some chives or parsley. Onto the sauce, which starts with a good amount of peanut butter, chunky or smooth, it's up to you. Then some coconut milk or cream, a good grating of ginger, and then the juice of 1 lime. It's also quite nice to add a little bit of pureed lemongrass if you can find it in your supermarket. This is also optional, but it's a tamarind paste which has an amazing fruity and tart flavour. Then just add some light soy sauce and some water, and we're going to whisk it together until combined. If you want the sauce to be a little bit sweeter, you can add some sugar, but I do find peanut butter to be fairly sweet. Often satay sauces are cooked first, but this recipe is a quick version, and we're just going to simply mix together. This is a really delicious sauce, and it's great just dipping some carrots or cucumber into it. Really tasty. For the final time, we're going to give the protein, in this case chickpeas, some colour before adding the rest of the ingredients. If you're in a rush, you could add everything at the same time, but personally I really love pre-cooking the protein to add another layer of flavour to the stir fry. Once they're nice and golden brown in colour, add a little bit of turmeric to really enhance this, and then we're going to deglaze with some soy sauce, which will coat the chickpeas nicely. Now just set them aside and try not to eat them all before the rest is ready. For this stir fry, I'm going to be using some leftover greens. I've got some cauliflower stalks and some cabbage that were both hanging out in the bottom of my fridge and just waiting for this stir fry. Heat up some oil and we're going to add the garlic and the white part of the spring onion. Stir fry for about 30 seconds or until the garlic starts to colour a little, and then we're going to add the rest of the greens. I find spreading the ingredients up the side of the pan really helps with getting a nice colour on everything, and it stops it from just sort of steaming in a pile. You can see the greens really brighten up as they're cooked. You can then add in some noodles or your carbohydrate of choice, followed by the pre-cooked chickpeas. Mix to combine, and then we'll add the green part of the spring onion, leaving a few for garnish. Generously spoon in the satay sauce, and you can turn the heat off now. You can also add more or less depending on how saucy you want it to be, or keep some back and drizzle it over once it's served up. This is one for all the peanut butter lovers out there. It's creamy and it's absolutely packed with fragrant flavour. I like to then finish it off with a bit of lime and some coriander. Some toasted peanuts would also be nice, but I've just got some more of those toasted sesame seeds.
Squeeze a little bit of lime on. That is so lovely. Delicious. Any dish that has peanut butter in it is going to be a winner for me. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to check out this one for some more plant-based goodness.